Hey everybody, Matt Guyan here again, doing commentary for my Books versus Movies review of Matilda. Everyone seemed to like the commentary I did for Little Mermaid, so I thought I'd do another one for my first ever Books versus Movies review. Oh, wow. It's really interesting to see how much things have changed. I don't use that angle, for one thing. I have it more directly on myself and the television. And I also do not do the have the thing directly on the movie playing directly on the television anymore because, as you can see from that clip, it looks kind of crappy. But at the time, I did not have any like DVD ripper software on my computer. All I had was the like a video screen capture, I think it's called Jing, that I downloaded for free. And so that's what I used to get all the clips on there, and then of course I had the actual DVD playing in the background. Now, however, I think Time Traveler's Wife is when I finally got, you just paid the $40 for the stuff. Yeah, you can see it's kind of jerky. It's not nearly as smooth as it is now. And there's no audio. Because the audio is usually out of sync, and you only use it like very rarely. But the audio is out of sync, and it gets more progressively out of sync the longer you capture. So the way I would do it in the beginning is I would just find the clips. I would literally play it on QuickTime and find the clips that I needed, and then just capture what I needed, and then go from there. And then for the screen, I would just have to turn around, play what I wanted, turn around, say the line, and then pause it and go back and cue it up. It took a lot of time, actually. It takes a lot less time to just rip the whole thing onto my computer and use that. Like, that took a lot of effort, and so I'm glad I finally got the DVD ripping technology. It also looks a lot better. It also means that it's a lot easier for me to get the copyright ID, third-party content stuff on YouTube, but whatever. Yeah, there are a lot more arguments too early on. I think when I originally conceived of the idea, I had it in mind that these were two separate. Like the other, like Movie Matt was more of a clone, and now it's just like he's just me with a hat. They're both me, but the hat just makes me more reasonable. But in this case, I think I actually had like I had it in mind that it would be two separate people, and so we had a lot more arguments. The arguments were fun to write and they were fun to edit, but at the same time it was really easy to lose track of where we were and who was speaking and all that sort of thing. Um, and so I finally just stopped doing them. I only did this for this review. I only showed like shots from the actual book for this review. And I still really like the idea because I'm showing movie clips, so it makes sense that I show clips from the book too, like text from the book, and if there's pictures and pictures from the book. It just took too much time. Like these take a lot of time as it is, and that was just one extra thing, and no one really seemed to miss it when I stopped doing it, so I haven't really done it since. I did have a commenter suggest that I read segments of the book, and I might actually do that for the Twilight review. I mean, yeah, there's stuff you obviously gotta make fun of in the Twilight review, so. Yeah. So, Books versus Movies was an idea. It came from two places. One was my friend Ruth, Ghostwritten87, who, for a vlog driver review, actually recommended that I do Where the Wild Things Are, looking at the book and movie simultaneously and comparing them. And I thought that was a great idea, but it was something that I had to really cram into 4 minutes for the vlog driver review, because I try to keep those under 4 minutes. And so I did that, and then I had just started watching Nostalgia Critic. And this is the second place, Nostalgia Critic. I just started watching him, and I loved his old versus new reviews. That was, I think it's still my favorite segment of his, is the old versus new reviews, where he does basically what I do, except with an old nostalgic movie, comparing it to a reimagining of the movie. He's done 7 of those now, I think, and they're really fun to watch, especially if you like comparative reviews. And I pretty much stole like the whole format from him, like, going like the 5 different categories and comparing them, bit by bit, and having the winner. Yeah, the audio is really off on those title screens too. Like, I finally straightened that out in the next review, but in the beginning it just doesn't sound nearly as polished. The title screens have stayed pretty much exactly the same. Like I changed the words obviously for the rounds, but the everything else stays pretty much exactly the same. That hasn't changed much in the intervening months since I started doing this. But yeah, so a lot of and you can really see in this one like there are some things that I steal like directly from Nostalgia Critic in this particular review. Um, but yeah, it was just kind of an idea. And choosing Matilda, like Matilda for my first review, that was pretty much an arbitrary choice. That's just the book that I happened to be reading for my favorite books review. I happened to be reading at the time. Just so I said, okay, well, it was made into a movie, and I know the movie, and I can get my hands on it easily. So yeah, I'll do that as my first one. And I actually, at the end of the Matilda favorite books review, I had like a little, kind of like movie Matt shows up and says, "Hey, you going to talk about the movie?" I said, "No, this is a book review. If we were doing to compare it to the movie, it'd be a completely different review." And movie Matt just kind of does this, oh, and then that's the end of it. But yeah, so yeah, here's another argument. Because I don't. The other thing with this one is that it's really difficult to figure out who's speaking sometimes because I'm showing the clips and I'm showing the pages from the book and of course it's this they're both me, duh. So it's hard to tell sometimes who's speaking. And that was one of the comments I got is that it's just sometimes hard to tell who's saying what. So especially with the arguments as well. So what I do now is that whenever I switch personas, go from book mat to movie mat or vice versa. Whenever I switch personas, excuse me, I will always show a clip of the person who's speaking first, even if it's just for a few seconds. I show a clip of that person speaking first, and then if I need to show clips from the movie, then I will show clips from the movie. But no matter what, I show that clip first. Yeah. One thing I've realized, we're on antagonists now, and one thing that I've realized is that Matilda, the movie, is a really, really good adaptation of the book. Like, it's one of the better ones that I've seen. But if you haven't read the book, Matilda, and you're not really familiar with the way that Roald Dahl writes, it's pretty disturbing. Like I've heard people talk about how it is kind of disturbing, with the principal or the headmistress throwing a girl over the fence by her hair, and throwing kids out the window and all these just terrible things that Trunchbull is doing. And yeah, I mean, if you're not familiar with the fact that Roald Dahl does write that kind of stuff, because his writing, and also if you're reading Roald Dahl, it does come off as very whimsical because it's just the way that he writes. So it doesn't seem like something that's really happening, whereas of course in a movie it does. But then, the things that are happening in Matilda aren't really any worse than the stuff that's happening in like Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. So, but it can look, and a lot of it is kind of unpleasant, and it's meant to be, especially with the antagonist, I think, because there's a lot of wide-angle, close-ups of Wormwood and Trunchbull, just because, trying to make them seem more like caricatures of themselves and trying to make them seem more gross and unpleasant, which they are. And so that totally makes sense, but I can see that if you haven't read the book, how this can be kind of an unpleasant movie to watch and just not a fun movie sometimes. I still like it. I still think it, and I know that a lot of people do. I mean, it's Roald Dahl. Yeah, you can see a lot of repeated clips, just because I didn't have the whole movie to work with. Oh, and you'll notice this is not split in 3 parts. I put it together in one. Back when I started doing this, you were only allowed to upload 10-minute movies, 10-minute videos to YouTube, no more than 10 minutes, and then they upped it to 15, and then my channel got approved for more than 15, so basically if the video is still under 2 gigs of size, it can be as long as I want it to be. Those book shots, by the way, was just me pointing a camera at the book. I mean, nothing more complicated than that. Movie Matt is also not wearing what he wears now. Now I have black hoodies that Movie Matt wears that I got from Threadless. what he's wearing here is just a black button-down shirt, just around whatever shirt I happen to be wearing at the time. There's a spot where I would have done it differently had I had like the full clip. Had I had the ripping technology. I would have actually gotten like the various gasps, like just shown all the time that the kids gasp, because that is one of the really just not very good aspects of the movie. It's just like they do that all the time. They always have that kind of that reaction. It's just like okay, yeah. I mean, it's a kids movie, but still. But that's something I would have done differently had I had the technology at my disposal. Won a gold medal, Brucey. Forgot about that one.
Bruce is ready to give in, and it isn't until Matilda starts cheering him on that he finds the strength to keep going.
I've also changed, because I have a bookshelf in the living room now, so I've changed the room around a bit, and so Mad Hatter now sits to the right of the television instead of to the left. So that's changed. Rereading the book, I really like the character of Hortensia in the book. I mean, I really do like the way that she's portrayed as just this, valiant soldier. And Lavender, all the kids. That was one of the things I really liked about the book on the reread. It's just the way they treat this school like it, really do treat it like it's a war zone. And the movie doesn't do that. And the movie is very much about Matilda and her influence, and the book is more about everybody. And just Matilda gave that final shove, but everybody had been working to bring about change, bring down the cruel dictator that was the headmistress Trunchbull.
Now, there's nothing wrong with either of these portrayals. They're both consistent with the message of the story, but for reasons that I'll explain later, I prefer the book's version. For reasons you'll explain later?
I don't do this anymore. If I have something that I need to explain later in another category, then I just explain it later in the other category. Yeah. The relationship between the two characters really has changed. Like I said, this really is it really does seem more like two people, like Matt and his clone. Yet as I said in my Little Mermaid Books vs. Movies review, I'm more like Mad Hatter in real life than I am like the other guy, regular Matt. So now we get into the catch-all category of imagery. This is one area where I did have to deviate from Nostalgia Critic, because I mean his categories are pretty much just character, some other aspect, and then story at the end. And I do have story at the end, and I do cover like the various character categories. But I knew I had to do something to talk about specifically the advantages of text versus the advantages of visual. Imagery has evolved too. Like, it's evolved more to include just exactly what it sounds like, the imagery. Just it's more of a description versus visuals now. Just what does the author or authors or directors or what everybody involved in the making of the story, what do they do to best use their individual aspect to its advantage? And I focus more on like what you're seeing, whether it's in your imagination or whether it's on the screen. But originally, this was kind of like I said, this was the catch-all category. This was like, okay, anything that's not covered in characters and story, I'll talk about here. And I've kind of moved away from that because first of all, I brought up the category of composition in a later. I think that was Time Traveler's Wife too. I brought up the category of composition and started talking about that, and that was often covered in imagery. And now I usually have the imagery category, but sometimes I just do composition because there's not that much to talk about with regards to imagery. And generally, my imagery category, you may have noticed this, my imagery category is generally my shortest one. It's just... it's just, okay, this is how the book does things, this is how the movie does things, this one is better. Like, I don't have to get into anything really intricate with that particular category. Thank you, that was a shot we definitely needed. Yeah, I really do like the use of forced perspective in this movie. Especially with Danny DeVito. I mean, to make somebody look significantly shorter than Danny DeVito. Even if it's a kid, it's really no easy
But don't
task.
get a full description because the narrator of the story isn't quite ready to give it. I mean, this woman is so scary, the freaking narrator is afraid of her. The movie portrays this by
Yeah, that was one aspect of the book I really liked too. Just you know, and imagery is a funny category because I've gotten both of these comments actually, where somebody will say book should always win imagery, or someone will say movie will always win imagery. I've gotten both of those comments, which I think shows it can this category can be won by either one. It just it depends on whether you're looking at at precisely what is on the screen, how they're choosing to portray things to you, or your imagination. Um, can your imagination outdo what technology can do? And sometimes it can, and sometimes it can't. It usually depends on how imaginative the story is in the first place. And sometimes I will pick one just because I really, really like the way they use the imagery to their advantage. And this was the case here. I picked movie because that's one of the things I really do admire about this movie is that for all that it's about magic and this girl with powers and so on, there's
the story. Which method told the story better?
but I one of the things I really like about the special effects here is just there's not that much that's like real that has a lot of CGI. There's some, but that's mostly just like the stuff for the trailer. But a lot of the effects are not that. A lot of the effect, like I love the one with the chalk. I don't think I mentioned this in the review, but when the chalk is writing on the board, the message on the board at the end, um, literally what they did is they had a guy on the other side of the chalkboard with a magnet, and they put the other magnet inside the chalk, and he just wrote the message backwards, and so the chalk wrote it the right way around on the chalkboard. I love that. It's so simple, and yet it works. Like I never would have guessed that that's what they did. But it's just it's one of those cases where they say, okay, what do we absolutely? We're not here to show off special effects. What do we absolutely need to tell this story, and how can we do this in the most simple way possible?
Was intended for children, whereas the book was intended. Oh wait, the book was intended for children too. Matt, remember? Maybe those things work really
Yeah, this is another one of those arguments that probably could have been cut out. Oh, Bob. Yeah, I am aware, by the way, that one of the FBI agents is Pee Wee Herman. I don't think that I actually mentioned that. Someone commented, so that tells me that I didn't mention it. Yeah, that right there, there he is, Pee Wee Herman. Not speaking in the Pee Wee Herman voice, so I didn't notice it first until I think I was watching it with my parents, and one of them pointed it out, and then I looked at it. Yeah, that is Pee Wee Herman. What the hell? I mean, when you got Pee Wee Herman playing an FBI agent, that's yeah, you're at least trying. And don't get me wrong, they were distracting from the story, but these guys are fairly amusing. Like it's not laugh out loud funny, but they're fairly amusing. Just as kind of these adults that are foiled. That's another aspect of the movie that I do kind of talk about in this category too. That I think people are, it kind of puts people off from this movie is that almost all of the adults are bad guys, or jerks or douches or something like that. They're not nice people. The only exception is Miss Honey and the librarian who's in the movie for like a minute. But pretty much everyone, the Wormwoods, the Trunchbulls, the FBI agents, the cook at the school, the kids are the good guys and the adults are the bad guys, and that it's nothing more complicated than that. It's this the kids rule dogs, kids rule adults drool, and I've seen a lot of kids movies kind of fall into that trap where the adults are all the bad guys. That's kind of the Nickelodeon phenomenon, I think. But it just, yeah, and this is a much better explanation for it. And the nice thing about the book is that the only bad guys were the Wormwoods and Trunchbull. Like, that was pretty much it. The teachers, we don't see much of them, but we get, from the little bit that we do see, we get the feeling that they're like, okay, we're just going to do our jobs, we'll try to soften the blow as much as possible. They were teachers along the lines of Miss Honey, it's just that Miss Honey was the only one that we saw. So it's not like all the adults were bad guys. Like, you don't even see any adults. You don't even see any other teachers. So it's just like, oh, well, they're attacking the headmistress. I guess we'll just watch. You don't even see any of it except for the cook, the cafeteria lady. That's it. So I still stand by the book being better. Probably I might judge the movie a little bit more harshly if I did this again, but I still do think it's a pretty good adaptation of the book. Oh God, here it comes. No. Matt dancing should not happen. Yeah. I feel like sometimes I'm running out of creative ways to end my reviews. But I don't always need creative ways to end my reviews, but oh, that's embarrassing. That's embarrassing. And then he lost the next 3 reviews. I noticed that, but the next 3 books versus movies reviews were all wins for movies. Yeah, and there's the scoreboard. And that's it. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed.